Our lives are very different. So one of the things that I guess I should back up and say is Joe and Chad are actually staying with us at the house this weekend so that we could have this recording. And I was sitting there listening to them talk, and I was thinking, when you think about the broad spectrum of open relationships or ENM, ethically non-monogamous relationships, it really spans from one side to the other. So Joe and Chad are swingers, and they're going to swinger events, and they've got all these swinger friends. And Scott and I are semi-open polyamorous folk. And so it's just so fascinating that we're all three, and if we include Joe, four, in this open relationship space having such drastically different experiences.
Yeah, the story, it's all under one umbrella, but it's all different little stuff under that umbrella. So it's always interesting to hear the different stories that we all have.
Welcome to the Open Bedroom Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Kalo. Welcome to conversations about open relationships, online dating, and creating relationship dynamics that truly align for you. Hey there. Did you know that I do online coaching? Yes, I do online coaching in the sex and relationship space. Some of the topics that are near and dear to my heart are open relationships. So that includes polyamory, swinging, or what we call the lifestyle. I also love conversations around online dating. We're talking Bumble, Tinder, Field, and more. And then the last thing that's really passionate and close to my heart is conscious uncoupling. That means we get to break up with people with love and respect, with dignity and hope. We get to create a life for our children that gets to be a little bit different. We can do things better than we have in the past. So if any of these topics sound interesting to you and you'd love to get some coaching from me, check out the link in the show notes or the link in my bio for more information on coaching with Jen. Welcome back to the Open Bedroom Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Kalo, and you might be wondering, why is Joe Levitt's husband, Chad, on today? Today, we're doing a very special episode called Husbands of Podcasters, the men behind the podcasters. And I get to interview the guys, and I'm pretty excited about this. So in true Joe Levitt, the confident swinger fashion, I thought I would show you guys some panties that Joe gave me. How freaking cute are these? The confident swinger. And apparently Chad has handmade these. He did all the little iron-ons.
Oh,
So I'm obviously
crafty.
I'm obviously not wearing these, but I do have them in my possession. And Joe and I have said we're going to record another podcast together, and I'll wear her underwear, and it'll be fun. So in that same vein, guys, boxers or briefs?
Well, I mean, I've been a boxers wearer since I was a little kid because it's more comfortable. I find it more comfortable. I don't like well, I guess I've got mine are more like boxer briefs. So they're a little bit like supportive.
Yes. I go with the boxer briefs as well. They are a little bit more supportive in certain spots. So,
Okay. Why would a man choose tighty whities?
Well, as somebody who does not choose tidy whities, I couldn't really speak to that.
I have not chose tidy whities since I was a little kid and forced to. So I'm going to say, I don't know why you would do tidy whities.
Yeah, they do it because they still have the mentality of an 11-year-old.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay. So, if we're going to choose boxer briefs, do we choose old man colors or fun?
What's an old man color?
Yeah.
Gray
Please
or
define that.
black or dark blue?
Well, you know what I choose.
Oh, do I?
Yeah. You bought my underwear for me.
I go with black. I normally do the variety pack of different colors, but I stick with the black, and I give the rest of them unworn to the kids and say, "Here's some underwear for you," because I don't like the colored ones.
Wow.
And I do zebra stripes and leopard print.
I kind of
Oh,
wish you would. I kind of wish you would. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes you get underwear at Christmas. So I've been kind of like saving up, waiting to give you a bunch of fun animal print underwear that would please me
Yeah.
in the bedroom.
It
Yeah,
would please you.
it
That
would please
please you?
me. Yeah, we'll have to ask Joe how she feels about Chad's black only underwear.
Well,
I'm
again,
gonna tell you right now, she hates it. Because she's like, "You're so plain Jane. Throw a color in every now and then."
Yeah.
it, as the person who has usurped my underwear purchasing responsibility, I guess you can dictate what I end up wearing.
I really could.
Yeah,
And
that's very
underwear
true.
for men is like comparable to lingerie for women. You guys aren't wearing lingerie for us, but you are wearing underwear for us for a brief moment. Ha ha ha. Do-do-do.
That's great. This is fantastic.
This podcast is already a 10 out of 10. I can tell. People right now are like 5-star that episode. Chat for
Already off
the
rail.
I know, chat for the listeners on my end who may not know you yet till,
Yeah.
a few more moments from now. Would you explain, tell the audience, who are you? Who is your wife? What kind of podcast do you guys have together? And we'll go from there.
Okay, so I am Chad, the other half of Joe Levitt for the Confident Swinger. She's had the podcast for a couple of years now. Um,
You guys just hit episode
she,
100.
yeah, she just hit 100. Yep. I am the person behind the scenes. I normally, up until about maybe a few months ago, I normally didn't jump on the mic. I didn't, I was the idea guy. She like, "Hey, I have ideas. Let me pitch this to you. What do you think of this?" And I would give her my input of whatever, what she thought and or what I thought of it, what she was saying. So I did jump on a couple. She did let me write an episode, which was very interesting. I realized that it doesn't come as fast to me, because I'm like, "Hey, I've been working on a month on this episode," and she's like, "Oh, I bust them out in 2 days." So, but yeah, so that's me. We've been in the lifestyle as swingers for 17 of our 19 years together, and we've we've met a lot of people and we've been a lot of places, and we've been doing this through all the ups and downs and tribulations for
Mhm.
17 years.
Thank you. And I guess if you're newly listening and maybe even you're from Joe's side of the world listening to this podcast, Scott, would you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Scott. I am your partner and a very, very infrequent guest on your podcast, The Open Bedroom. What a great name for a podcast, by the way. That was very clever and creative.
There's this
Whoever it was that came up with
very
that.
sexy guy with a red beard in my life who
Yeah.
walked up to me one day and was like, "You should change your podcast name to The Open Bedroom." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, we should."
Man, you're pretty lucky to have such a cool and clever and creative guy in
I
your
really
life.
am. I really am very fortunate.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you've only been on a few episodes. That's not entirely true. I think you're at 5 or something now. And Chad, you've been on at least a handful on Joe's. And so some of the reasoning in having this conversation today is when Joe and I look at our top podcast stats, which episodes are the very best? They're with you guys. Like our audiences want to hear from both of you. And I'm noticing the more that I have Scott and our partner Steph on as well, those are also really highly listened to. And as our communities grow to really have a lot of interest in our partners, sometimes there's even moments of fandom. So, Chad, would you tell us about your fan moment the other day?
So, like I said, I've only been on a handful of episodes. So yeah, we went up to Michigan for a Pirate Nation party, and we've known these people for many years. And we went up there and was standing by the bar, and someone was like, "Hey, are you?" Because normally, I when we go to meet and greets or whatever, they're like, "Oh, is your wife Joe from the podcast?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Oh, I need to talk to her. I have, she's in my thoughts, and she speaks what I want like to speak." And so we were there, and someone came up to me. They were like, "Hey, are you Chad from the podcast?" And at first, I'm like, no. Oh, then I'm like, oh yeah, my wife's podcast, yes. And he was like, oh my goodness, like some of the episodes you've been on, some of the stuff you speak are just like what I was thinking, and that I couldn't tell my wife that, or you know, the thoughts you were saying were 100% right on like what I was thinking, and I was like, okay, I've never had this. I was kind of taken back at first because I don't like the limelight. I don't want, you know, I don't. I'm kind of private, so I don't like the people coming up to me. So that was the first time that's happened. So I'm a little. Uh, it was fun. It was interesting, and we've stayed in contact. I've stayed in contact with him. We've chatted and stuff, and so now he's like, "What are you thinking? What are you writing another one? What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Wait, I will get to that. I haven't yet." So, but yeah, so that's it's been interesting. So,
Now that you're famous, right?
or I get the local guys that I've known for 20 years. I'm like, "Hey, I listened to you. Good job." And that's the end of it. So.
That's awesome. So I guess my first question as we dig into this topic is, what's it like to have your person have a podcast that's so public? How does that feel for you? What comes up when you think about it?
Go ahead, Chad.
I'm gonna say for me, when she first approached me a couple years ago about it, I'd only listened to one lifestyle podcast, and that podcast we listened to was more of like the people who put it on was like, this is this is what we did last night at the event. This is all the sexy stuff we did. This is, you know, the person that we got to, you know, spend the night with and stuff. And I was like, hey, we're not that exciting. Like we are definitely not that exciting. And for me being a private person and kind of in the public and normal life, I was fine up until a line. Like I didn't want too much of my stuff aired because, you know, growing up in a small town with my parents who were still married for 50 plus years, like that was always taboo. That was kind of like you could talk a little bit about it, but then that was the end of it. And so that's kind of what I've always known is like I was fine to a point. And then I will say over the last year or so, I'm kind of just like, hey, you know, whatever you want to talk about is fine with me. We'll talk about it. I don't mind sharing my thoughts, opinions, you know, about everything. Um, as long as long as it doesn't get back to, I come from a large family. I just didn't want to get back to my family because I didn't want to have that conversation with my 70-year-old mom at 6 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out what does your wife do? I'm confused. I thought she worked at this job, you know. So that was for me. And I will also say Joe is a big personality. And so dealing with that, sometimes there's some backlash with that. Sometimes there's people who uh, they just assume I'm a big personality, and that's definitely not the case. So, but
All right, Scott, what about you?
Um, I mean, it's kind of fun, especially given our social circle is mostly your social circle, and I just kind of drift into it from time to time. And a lot of people in there are, I mean, it's a social circle that's kind of built around the topics and the interests explored in your podcast. So it's kind of fun encountering people who are kind of fans of yours or talk about getting something meaningful from listening to your podcast. Um, I don't it doesn't bother me at all in that I'm not it's funny, I'm a private person just because in the sense that I don't go out and advertise, you know, my stuff, my personal life to people just because it doesn't occur to me to do so. It's not that I have anything to hide and I don't feel any shame whatsoever in uh in our personal life. I mean, to a degree, you're you know, like you're not really getting into a lot of dirty details usually, or you're not coming across in such a explicit manner that it's crass. Um, so I'm fine with that. Like and I value you more. I respect you and appreciate you more and find you more appealing because you have this creative outlet and because uh you put out this content that is uh not only entertaining but actually helpful to people. It's valuable information, it's valuable insights. It makes people feel related to, or it addresses dilemmas or desires that they're having. Um, so I just think it's wonderful that you do that. And there have been a couple of instances where aspects of our personal life that were made public on your podcast, like caused some real world minor inconveniences, uh, just because of how other people who know us responded to it. Um, but I view that more of being their issue than my issue. It doesn't really bother me. I like what you're doing. I like that you do it, and I like that it provides value to other people while giving you an outlet for expressing yourself and your creativity.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go deeper. Let's talk about the minor inconveniences and some of the
Okay.
backlash that we've gotten. Or I also want to pose the question to both of you as well about, both Joe and I are super honest and transparent with our listeners because we're both teachers. We want to show you here's a path. And for those of you that are listening and you're still like, I don't know who this Joe person is, the Confident Swinger is a podcast very similar to mine, but it's geared for swingers, where I'm geared towards polyamory. And so I feel like she's the yin to my yang, and she's also an amazing educator. And so what I love about both of our shows is you get real world help and advice, and you might have had an issue just the night before with something that hopefully we address for you. And we both covered topics. This, Chad, you were on one where we talked about erectile dysfunction. And Scott and I actually did a very similar episode that same week that, unintentionally launched. We've talked about our own sex lives. We've talked about what it's like to bring another person into the bedroom and how to help them feel included and how to not just be an asshole, And that kind of stuff is raw. It's very real. And it's exposing, like it's all of those things. And so I wonder, especially for you, Chad, since Joe's not on with us, is there a process that you and her go through when you're going to have a subject that's very touchy and maybe, triggering or emotional for people to hear or for you to even express?
I'm gonna say for us, normally she will come to me with an idea, be like, hey, like here's this idea that I have that may show you more vulnerable, that led to some therapy that you had to do. Are you okay with sharing that? And I would say for a while, I was like, no, I don't want people to know that. I don't want them to know that I had these problems that I had to seek help. But now I'm like, it doesn't bother me anymore. Like I am fine. If our story can help somebody down the road with their story, then by all means, I'm all for it. Uh, also, kind of mentioned growing up, my family comes with, you don't talk about your feelings, you don't seek those help, you're a man, you deal with it. Like, and it's evolved. And now it's like, it's okay if you need to seek some help, need to talk to someone. So with that, she comes to me with ideas and she's been hesitant up until a point, but I was just like, let it rip, go with it. Like go, you put whatever you want. Like it doesn't bother me because we get a lot of people who come up to us at different events. It's like, hey, the content she put out on this episode really helped me, really spoke to me. And I'm like, great, that's awesome. I'm glad I helped you because that's what she wants. That's what she wants to put stuff out there. And listening to your podcast, I know you want to as well. Like you want to, hey, if I can help you, if this episode helped you, it reached out to you, then that's why I did. I did it for you. I did it for the help that you need. So that's kind of that's kind of how I view it. So
Scott, let's kick that same question over to you. Do you want to start with how we handle the really difficult conversations on the podcast?
What difficult? What do you mean?
Well, like,
Give me an example.
also, like, I feel like our ED conversation that we had was difficult. We even talked about sometimes issues that we've had within our own sex lives. We've talked about, or I've talked about our sex life many times. I've talked about our three ways. I've talked about how we only date unicorns. Like I feel like I've kind of aired everything out there.
Yeah. Um. Wait. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Are you asking me how I feel about
Mhm.
us discussing those things on the podcast, or you discussing those things on the
I'd
podcast?
say just both. How does that affect you? How do you feel about it? Anything.
Um. Well, I feel fine when usually if we talk about it on there, the handful of times an issue like that may have come up when I was on the podcast, it's something that we have already discussed extensively between ourselves,
Mhm.
and so we're pretty clear in alignment on it, and it's easy for us to then explain the reasoning and the I guess the sequence of communicating feelings and thoughts that we went through to arrive at that alignment. Um, on the other hand, I think there have been times where we weren't necessarily in alignment as a consequence of maybe not clearly communicating or not clearly understanding each other, and then uh, taking away a let's say an inaccurate assessment of how the other person felt or what the other person was describing, and then relaying that to others. Boy, that's a mouthful. Sometimes I've felt like the way you have described my position or my views on things is not what I intended when I tried to explain those feelings to you. And then we've had to go back and talk about it more. And so I may have found that frustrating to hear you giving a an inaccurate assessment of my feelings or my position on the podcast when I wasn't there to push back or to clarify. Um, but it doesn't stick with me because we always end up talking about it more and getting clarity on it. And I just don't hold frustrations toward you really.
I'm
Uh,
thinking of a few of these times where it's been an interesting, almost therapy session for us after the fact.
yeah,
He's listened to it live, like it's already live. And he'll
yeah,
go, "Is that really how you feel about me? Is that really how you thought I felt or reacted?" And I was
yeah.
like, "Yeah. And this is my reality." And he's like, "That's not at all what I was trying to say." And so then it gives us an opportunity to go, I need to listen better. You need to communicate better. And let's maybe get on the same page.
And I think it's important to point out that I absolutely never have the sense that you're doing that intentionally, that you're
Right.
intentionally misrepresenting me in some way, not even to make yourself look better. So I don't, yeah, I'm not, I don't view you as being dishonest in any way when that happens. I'm more frustrated with the fact that like we both want to have honest and clear communication with each other. And so I'm frustrated with the failure of communication. I'm not frustrated with your intentions at all.
Chad.
Well, I was going to say if we could flip to the other side of the coin on
Of
this,
course.
we have like when viewers come up to us when we go places, I'm always amused when someone comes up and they're like, "Oh, you're probably the most confident person in the world because your wife does this podcast, or you're probably getting laid 24/7. And I'm like, no, that is just because that's her, that is not me. Like I have my own set of problems. And so I always um, love that when people when viewers just assume since they listen to the podcast, like they know me and they know like, since she's the confident swinger that I'm the confident swinger
Confident husband.
A, and
Yeah.
and so yeah, so I'm always amused by that. So I didn't know if that's happened to you, Scott, or not. If like people just assume they've seen you on 5 episodes, they know you if you're out
I
and
don't
about or whatever.
I don't know. I haven't I mean, I've only seen, I guess, a couple of very like maybe two or three comments that were feedback that had anything to do with me. And it wasn't like, oh wow, that was Scott's such an idiot, or like an asshole for thinking that thing that he didn't actually think. I've never really had to experience that. So yeah, I haven't had that issue yet.
It's like God, Scott's such a lucky guy. Like,
Yeah.
especially on our three-way episodes, they're like, oh, he's getting fucked all the time.
There are times when Joe's like, "Hey, this review, this person left a review. It's about you. You want to hear it?" I'm like, "Nah, I'm good. It's okay. Like, I appreciate it, but I don't." So,
I would say Scott likes to hear the reviews. So
Yeah.
again, like our lives are very different. So one of the things that I guess I should back up and say is Joe and Chad are actually staying with us at the house this weekend so that we could have this recording. They live a couple hours away from us. And so we wanted to make this happen. And we talked for hours last night after we ate dinner. And I was sitting there on the sofa listening to them talk. And I was thinking, when you think about the broad spectrum of open relationships or ENM, ethically non-monogamous relationships, it really spans from one side to the other. So Joe and Chad are swingers and they're going to swinger events and they've got all these swinger friends. And Scott and I are what did we call ourselves? Semi-open polyamorous folk. And
Yeah.
so when we're engaging with another person, we only date women. So that narrows it down. And we don't go out to events because we're dating people, 2-on-1 or whatever that dynamic looks like. So we're not out and about where people would say, oh my gosh, I listened to the podcast. I love Scott, blah, 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 blah. So our only feedback is through social media, or, if you're on Spotify and you hit, hey, I want to respond to this podcast, that's all that we have. And so it's just so fascinating that we're all three, and if we include Joe, four, in this open relationship space having such drastically different experiences.
yeah, the story, yeah, it's all under one umbrella, but it's all different little stuff under that umbrella. So it's always interesting to hear the different stories that we all have. So plus we've been doing this a little while. So
That's true. Much
yeah,
longer than us.
yeah.
I wanted to circle back to Scott
Wait,
because
wait, doing this in terms of a podcast or doing this just
We've been doing the lifestyle
Oh, right, right.
for a
Gotcha.
long
yeah.
time, and it's evolved and changed over the years. So
Yeah. Okay, what were you about to ask, Jen?
Okay, so I wanted to circle back around because it doesn't sound like Joe and Chad have had any negative experiences from things that have aired on the podcast, but we have. We've had a few interesting experiences. Do you want to cover any of that? Just because I want to normalize that, when you air out your life, sometimes there are some negatives, but predominantly it's been really positive.
Well, three come to mind for me. One was quite overt, the other was pretty implied, and the third was rather ambiguous. The first being when my mom and stepdad, uh, who are uh I I don't necessarily, let's say they're very socially conservative, um uh heard it and were just aghast that their precious baby boy was doing sexy things, and that those sexy things were being just broadcast on a public platform. Um
I'd like to make
and
a plug for episode number 69. That was the That was the episode.
Yeah. Um, the second one was where without giving any personally identifying information, like without saying anything that would personally identify the people involved, um, I described my assessment of a dynamic between a couple that we know or knew and were friends with, and I think it portrayed them, or it portrayed the nature of their relationship in a way that they weren't happy with, or at least one of them. And it portrayed their dynamic in a way that a third party to their relationship wasn't happy with and was incredibly displeased with. And so then that couple just completely separated from us socially.
Blocked us
Uh,
on every channel. Never told us that that was the thing that pissed them off, but we knew that was
right.
pissed them off.
Um, and fair enough. And then the third was where uh you described my tastes for something that one of our partners did.
Mm-hmm.
You described me having what I thought came across as a very negative reaction towards something one of our partners did. And I don't know whether or not she ever actually heard that or was aware of it. I was really, I guess, worried and upset at the time, because I was worried that she would hear that and get the idea that I viewed her in a negative way. And then it just so happened that not long after that, we had I guess things dissolved between us and that partner. And I don't know whether or not it has anything to do with that moment on the podcast. Um, but maybe it did. I'm not sure.
Jen, can I ask you a question?
Uh-huh.
Obviously, I listen to your podcast as well. I'm curious on the episode of the breakup. I don't remember what number it is because I'm bad
Yeah.
remembering which one. Did they ever hear that? And like, did you ever have pushback from that? Like, oh, well, I heard that, and I'm just curious.
I have no idea. We never heard from her again after she said, if you see me in public at Walmart, you can wave across the parking lot. So we never heard from her again. So I don't know. I mean, I I try to be transparent. I try to be honest. I try to share both sides. And in that particular breakup episode, I was like, I loved her. I had feelings for I was about to tell her I love you. And then we got broken up with right before any of that could happen. And so I hope that if she did hear the episode, she was like, either like, woo, glad I broke that off, or like, oh shit, maybe I fucked this up. Um, and in that particular episode Scott's referring to, it was actually around that. But I was talking about fetishes and I was talking about kinky shit. And I was saying, like, I love squirting and being squirted on. I love wetness. I love all the fluids. Give me all of them, except like poop is not a fluid, right? Don't poop on me. Anyway, I was just saying, like, it's okay. Don't yuck somebody's yum. And I was like, Scott, on the other hand, he doesn't like fluids. He doesn't like spit. He doesn't like all of that. And so it's okay. Like, it's okay to like it and not like it. And it's great that there's two of us because, like, splash me like it's a water park. Maybe don't spit in his mouth.
I'm right there with you. I like it too. So you just splash it anywhere you want.
Yeah, but to Scott's point, like being really sensitive that she might have heard that and been like, "Oh wow, I feel bad about this now. I didn't know he didn't like it." And then I think on Scott's side, he should tell his partners, "I am not into fluids," you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, that just got off on a random tangent. Okay, I want to get us back in the guardrails of what we were talking about before fluids. Do you see value in each of us having podcasts of this nature?
Yeah. I mean, I think I already kind of answered that, elaborated on that. Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, we did touch on that earlier. I agree. There's been many times people come up and they're like, "Hey, what she said really helped me push me through this," or we're new to this and we don't know, and we listened and we are like, "Yes, this is what we need." So I find I think there's a lot of value, and I take pride in both of your podcasts that you guys do help so many people, and
Thank you.
it's so broad that it can help these swingers or these poly or these whatever, and it can help people who want to take the time to listen to it and keep an open mind. So
So my next question is supportive of this. And I know that each one of you are supportive to your partner in a different way. So Chad, what does supporting Joe with her podcast look like for you? And then Scott, will go to you. I know you use it in a lot of different ways.
I support her however she needs. When we go on, when we go to Hito, I'm like, hey, I'm broad, I am big. Here's my billboard. You put, and so we made shirts, and we give out underwear, and I will, the podcast panties. You have to weed through that vinyl to get it ready. Hours upon hours. I try to go on the social platforms, and when people are curious or whatever, I'm like, hey, you should really listen to this and help out. And then I always talk it up to people like, hey, you should, yes, I love Joe. She's my wife, but the stuff that she's putting out is really good stuff, and it can be helpful. And so I'm whatever she needs me to be, if that is behind the scenes. I'm not real tech savvy, but I will try if she needs to bounce ideas off or um, but also with that, she's very open minded to be like, if I'm like, hey, I think that it wouldn't work, but that's my opinion. Sometimes she does take that into consideration because she does want that thinking from a different side of the coin and whatnot. So that's whatever she needs is what I will do, and I'm behind her 100%.
All right, Scott, what about you?
So,
How are you supportive to the podcast?
how am I supportive? Well, for a while, I was supportive in the fact that I was doing all of your video editing and production for you.
Yeah.
Um, but these days, I think it's mostly just from, I mean, we talk so regularly about the things that you discuss on there. You take ideas and you bounce them off of me, and I think we have a lot of meaningful communication discussion that helps you gain clarity and perspective on the ideas or the topics you want to talk about. Um, and then other than that, I just keep you keep your ass massaged and keep you like nice and sexed up so you can feel, as you put it, all juicy and creative.
Yes, you are my inspiration and my muse, and thank you for keeping me sexy. Well, I was thinking more along the lines of like potential partners, dating apps, set life. Like you are constantly sending out episodes
Oh,
or
that's true.
using this almost like not like a Rolodex, but like your own personal library of I just did an episode on how to be an amazing lover. Here is the episode link.
Well, hey, okay. Now
Okay.
look, I've never said, "Hey, I'm an amazing lover. Here's a podcast episode I did where I explain what an amazing lover I am, just so you know." No, I've made people aware of your podcast because I thought that they would have, because I thought that you had a lot to offer for their interests. But yes, I love being your biggest cheerleader and promoter in social media.
Yeah, dare I say, I think our podcast, I keep saying our, I guess it's mine, but you're on it a
Yeah,
lot. I do think it helps us get chicks, actually.
maybe.
Yeah.
Like we're talking to someone now and she's like, "Oh my God, I've listened to like 15 of these. Y'all are so yummy." I'm like, "Thanks." We are.
They're super fanning you guys.
They're super fanning us in our own way. Look at that.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
I have two more questions. One is this is for both of you. Have you ever considered coaching couples with us? Because both Joe and I are coaches. I do think that there's some client demand for this, and we're seeing within our episodes that our best episodes now have you two in it. So, what do you think about? Is there a future where you're joining up in some sort of husband-wife coaching thing?
Scott,
Chad.
I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I'd actually be totally down with that. A lot of the time, I mean, very often when you've had coaching clients, you talk with me about their issues, and I mean, uh, at the at the risk of sounding presumptuous, a lot of their issues seem very intuitive to me, and you have a more delicate and tactful approach to getting people to self-reflect than I do. Probably I'm probably a lot more direct and even brusque about it. Uh, but yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun, actually.
It's true. He does. I will run things by him. So like this thing happened and this was my advice. Do you have any additional advice? Like next time I talk to them, maybe I should. And I'm noticing within sessions, I'll have a client go, well, what does Scott think? Or what does Scott do? Or does this ever happen to Scott? And I'm like, well, actually it does. And this is what I think he would tell you. So, okay. What about you, Chad?
I'm going to take the other side of that. I'm going to say no. I don't feel like I have enough of the schooling or education to kind of help people. I can give you my advice of what I've learned on this planet for 50 years or what my mindset is, but I don't think I could. I don't think I could give Joe sometimes will ask me some different like what is the guy's thought of this and I will tell her, but I don't think I could. I don't think I could do that. So
Okay. All right. So my last question to wrap this up is really to highlight both of you as individual men, not just, partners to Joe and I, but if you had your own podcast, what would it be about? What are you into? Let us see how you are a different individual than we are. Go for it. Chad, you want to go first?
sure, I'll go first. I'm a sports guy. I like sports. I'm a sports fan. So that seems easy for me because I do know sports. Um, if I had to think a little bit more about it, I'm a big outdoors person. I like to fish. I could do something to that nature. Um, as a grandpa, I could do all sorts of grandpa advice with little grandkids. And then something that I'm passionate about is I'm passionate about like finance and credit. I could do something of that nature. I just don't know if I would be able to come up with content every week to put out. I think that's obviously writing episodes. It's hard for me to come up with stuff. So, but yeah, that's what I would do. That's a little bit of me. So,
That.
Uh, I'd probably talk about everything but sports and fishing. I mean, I spent a decade as a behavioral scientist. I'm fascinated by the way people think uh, and process information and process feelings and communicate with each other. But I'm also now I'm moving into this. I just finished this engineering degree because that is a passion of mine. I'm passionate about understanding how things work. I love talking about how things work or explaining how things work, uh, whether it's machines or people. Um, and I don't know. There are so many different things that I would find that I find interesting and that uh, I would enjoy talking about, whether it's how people work or how things work or tearing apart movies and TV shows. Um, yeah, I
or
don't
how
know,
to put
Scott.
together Legos. Like,
Yeah,
hey,
Yeah, definitely. Like building things. I love building things. Yeah, I don't even, I would have a hard time figuring out where to begin, really.
Yep.
So I don't know, maybe someday.
Yeah. And you don't have to have one. I was just curious. And
Yeah.
neither of you are out there trying to have a sex podcast, clearly.
No, that's yeah, aside from sports and fishing, that's probably the one other thing that I would not, it wouldn't even really occur to me to talk about is my sex life on a podcast. But
Yeah.
I'm glad you got
Hey.
that covered for
I've got
both
that
of us.
covered for us. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Chad, Scott, thank you so much for joining me in this
Thank
really
you.
unique, interesting episode that, we've never done anything like this before, but I loved hearing about your unique individual selves, about how you're supporting your ladies and the podcasts, what it's like to have fandom out in the streets. Sir Honeybowl just made an appearance. This is Scott's
Yeah,
dog.
Sir Honeyball needs to get off the couch. So
Sir Honeybowl slept with me last night. He needs to learn how to share the bed a little better.
he's very affectionate.
Yeah, he's made best friends with Joe and Chad, which is pretty cute. So,
Good.
all right. Thank you guys. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Bye-bye.
having us.
Thank you for listening to the Open Bedroom Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and give us a like and click subscribe below and stay up to date on all the new episodes that we release. If you have a topic that you'd really like more information on, leave us a comment below and we'll see what we can do. Feel free to share this podcast with all of your friends and especially your partners. This is a great way to open up some amazing conversations. We'll see you next week.